ಶುರು ಮಾಡಿಬಿಡೋದಾ ಸರ್?
ಶುರು ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು ಮೇಡಮ್, ಶುರು ಮಾಡ್ಬಿಡಿ. ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ, ಶುರು ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು. ಶುರು ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು. ಆಯ್ತು.
ಓಂ ನಮೋ ಬ್ರಹ್ಮಾದಿಭ್ಯೋ ಬ್ರಹ್ಮವಿದ್ಯಾ ಸಂಪ್ರದಾಯಕರ್ತೃಭ್ಯೋ ಓಂ ಶ್ರೀಭ್ಯೋ ನಮೋ ಮಹದ್ಭ್ಯೋ ನಮೋ ಗುರುಭ್ಯಃ. Namaste. A very good morning to everyone. In the previous two lectures, we delved into pre-Shankaracharya Vedantic tradition and examined the various schools of thought that preceded him. We analyzed the schools that were criticized by him and the ones that he supported and advanced. Today, we shall shift our focus to Shankaracharya's own system and examine its unique features. Unique here simply means its distinctive character with regard to the contemporary interpretations, not unique in itself. Its uniqueness, its distinctiveness stems from the fact that it is an Anadi Sampradaya, a tradition that extends back to an indefinite past. Shaankaraprasthanam tu Anadi Sampradayagata Prakriya Visheshabhyupagamādeva Anyebhyo Vilakshanam. Swami's writings. So this chapter is titled Shaankaravedantamaryaada. Swami writes, Adhedanim etat sampradaya vidam vachanaihi prakatikrita vedantamaryaada vishesha vishishya prakhyapyante prasthanantara vailakshanya dyotanartham. Let me start the slideshow. The very first feature that Swami takes up to examine is Tatra Sarva Prathama Nirupanam Arhati Purva Kiranodaharatam Dravidacharya Vakyam Siddham tu Nivartakatvat iti. The function of Shruti. How is Shruti a pramana? How does it function? How Shruti is a karana of Brahmajnana. Pramana, we know, is the specific cause of a veridical cognition. Pramakaranam pramanam. Of the 6 pramanas, Shabda or Shruti is employed in Vedanta. By definition, Brahman excludes the applicability of the other sources of knowledge except Shruti. The cornerstone of Shankaracharya's Vedanta is that Shruti is the only valid means of knowing Brahman. An example of a different standpoint here is Bharatra Prapancha, who accepts Anumana as a pramana. Vachaspati Mishra also understands Anumana as Shruti Anugrahita Tarka, that is instrumental in ascertaining the nature of Brahmani. He says, Anumanam Vedanta Avirodhi Tad Upajeevicha Ityapi Drashtavyam. Shankaracharya, on the other hand, is very clear. The only admissible pramana is Shruti. The case for Shruti as the only appropriate instrument of Brahmajnana consists in showing why this knowledge cannot be attained through the other ways of knowing. And this Shankaracharya seeks to do at every available opportunity in his commentaries. He is emphatic on the absolute inapplicability of all pramanas except Shruti for the knowledge of Brahman. Let us first confirm the inapplicability of sense perception as incompetent in apprehending Brahman. Sense perception is inadequate because, first, Brahman is without qualities. Each sense organ is naturally capable of grasping and revealing a quality, a guna, which is appropriate to its own nature. Sound, shabda, sensation, sparsha, form, rupa, taste, rasa, and scent, gandha, are their respective spheres of functioning. The instruments of perception cannot function beyond these limits. Brahman, however, remains unapproachable through any of them because of its uniqueness. It has neither sound, nor touch, nor form, nor taste, nor smell. It is without qualities, nirguna, and therefore outside the domain of the sense organs. Ashabdam asparsham arupam avyayam tatharasam nityam agandhavatya yate. Brahman is limitless. To be an object of sense knowledge, it has to be finite and delimited, to be one object among many objects. However perfect or magnified the capacity of a sense organ is imagined to be, it will function only in a limited sphere of activity and therefore cannot approach Brahman. The third, in addition to the inherent limitations of the sense organs and the absence in Brahman of any quality that can be apprehended by any of them, there is the impossibility of objectifying Brahman. The process of empirical knowledge involves a distinction between subject and object, the knower and the known. We know things by making them the objects of our awareness, and in this way they are available for our scrutiny and analysis. Knowledge of an object presupposes the subject, the knower, but Brahman is the eternal subject. As awareness, it illumines everything, and the entire universe, including the mind, the body, the sense organs, is its object. So it is impossible for the unchanging knower to be made an object of knowledge. Absurd to conceive of the subject as an object because in its absence there is no subject to know the object as an object. Brahman is the light of even lights. This is what Shankaracharya beautifully describes as Yatra avidyavasthayam anyonyam pashyate tatrapi yenedam sarvam vijanati tam kena vijaniyat. And he narrates a beautiful Shrauta story to illuminate that the alternative to this is silence. Bashkalinacha Badhvaha Prishtaha san Avachaneyanaiva Brahma Provacheti Shruyate. Bashkali approached Badhva and said, "O revered sir, teach me Brahman." But Badhva remained silent. Satushni babhova. Tam hadvitiye tritiye vachana uvat. When he persisted a third time, second time, third time, Badhva replied, "I am teaching you, but you do not comprehend it. Upashanto yamatma iti." Now, if perception is unfitted for furnishing us with the knowledge of Brahman, are any of the other four pramanas, Anumana, Upamana, Arthapatya, Anupalabdhi, etc., more competent? The view is that these sources are dependent on perception for their data and therefore cannot have access to areas from which it is debarred. Inferential knowledge, Anumana, for example, is derived from a knowledge of the invariable relation, Vyapti, between the thing inferred, the Sadhya, and the ground from which the inference is made, the Hetu. Brahman, however, has no apprehensible or differentiating qualities with which it has an invariable relation and which can form the ground of an inference. It is impossible, therefore, to infer the existence of Brahman. What does this mean? Does this mean that Brahman cannot be known at all? No, there is no hint of the skeptic in Shankaracharya. He is unwavering in his position that Brahman is knowable. It is knowable only by Shruti Pramana. Shruti is the valid means, the only means to know Brahman. Tad Brahma, Sarvajnam, Sarvashakti, Jagadutpatti Sthiti, Laya Karanam, Vedanta Shastra Deva Avagamyate. Now, a question that arises here is how does Shruti aid the realization of the Atman or Brahman? Does it describe or define Brahman like it does Dharma and Svarga in Purva Mimamsa? Does it inform us of its existence and its identity with Atman? An answer to this is found in Shankaracharya's commentary on the Gita. In this section of the text, Atman is described as Aprameya, Antavanta ime deha, Nityasyokta sharirinaha, Anashino prameyasya, Tasmat yudhyasva bharata. Here, the word aprameya is literally that which cannot be known or established by the instruments of knowledge. Aprameyasya na prameyasya pratyakshadi pramanaihi aparichhedyasya ityartha. Here the Purva Pakshi raises a question. The Atman cannot be called aprameya because it is indeed known by Shruti, if not perception, etc. It is known by Shruti. Therefore, it cannot be called aprameya. Nanu agamena atma parichidyate pratyakshadina cha purvam. It can be known by Shabda Pramana, by Shruti. Then how can you say that the Atma is aprameya? To this Shankaracharya says, na Atmanaha svatah siddhatva. Atman is swayam siddha. It does not need a pramana to be known. Shastrantu antyam pramanam atad dharmadhyaropanamatra nivartakatvena pramanatvam atmanaha pratipadyate natu ajnatartha jnapakatvena. This is very important. Shankaracharya says no. Shruti is called the Antyam Pramanam for Atma not because it makes known an unknown entity, natu ajnatartha jnapakatvena. Rather, because it clears away the erroneous ideas about Brahman. Atadharmadhyaropanamatra nivartakatvena pramanatvam. In no unclear terms, Shankaracharya delineates the function of Shruti as strictly negative. It cannot directly or positively communicate the Atman. Because the problem is not to know the Atman, it is to remove the wrong ideas that we entertain about it. Avidya kalpita bheda nivritti paratvat shastrasya. नहि शास्त्रम् इदन्तया विषयभूतं ब्रह्म प्रतिपिपादयिषति किं तर्हि प्रत्यगात्मत्वेन अविषयतया प्रतिपादयते अविद्याकल्पितं वेद्य वेदृत वेदनादि भेदम् अपनयति. This is extremely important. The case for the adequacy of Shruti is founded on the argument that the words of Shruti are not required to produce Brahma or to demonstrate its existence. Brahman is self-revealing, always manifest. The Vedas, according to Shankara, does not reveal the Atman in the sense of illuminating its existence. Being the nature of consciousness, Atman is self-revealing. It is absolute awareness in whose light everything stands revealed. The Shruti does not tell us how the Atman is, how Brahman is. It does not tell us that Brahman is Ananda Swarupa. It does not tell us that it is Jnana Swarupa. It does not tell us it is Ananda Ghana, Chit Swarupa. It does not intend to tell us anything about the Atman or Brahman. This is not how the Shruti works. The Shruti aims to remove every misconception that we hold about the Atman, about Brahman. Its primary objective is to eradicate any and all misconceptions that we hold regarding the nature of the self and the ultimate reality. We think we are this body. We think we are born. We think we will die. We think God, there is a God. God is omniscient, omnipotent. We think that He created this world. We carry so many countless misconceptions about Atman. Shruti works to dispel these notions. It works to remove the layers of false ideas and misconceptions that obscure the ultimate reality. And that is all. There is nothing more to be done. Once these misconceptions have been successfully uprooted, the truth will be revealed without any need for any further elaboration. There is absolutely no necessity to tell us how the Atman is, what Brahman is. It is enough to remove the wrong ideas. And this is what Swami highlights in the first portion of his chapter. I'll read out this paragraph from his book. सिद्धं तु निवर्तकत्वात् इति अस्यायम् अभिप्रायः सर्वत्र श्रुतिषु ब्रह्मण्यात्मशब्दप्रयोगात् आत्मशब्दस्य च प्रत्यगात्मन्येव गूढत्वात् सर्वस्यात्मत्वेनैव ब्रह्म विवक्षितम् इति गम्यते. आत्मनश्च स्वयं सिद्धत्वं सर्वैरप्यभ्युपेयम् सर्वैरपि अहम् अस्मि इत्येव प्रतीयमानत्वात् नाहमस्मि इति केनाचिदपि प्रत्येतुम् अशक्यत्वाच्च इत्थञ्च स्वयं सिद्धे ब्रह्मणि किमस्ति शास्त्रस्य कृत्यं येनास्य तत्र प्रामाण्यं स्यात् इति अत्र द्रविडाचार्य आह सत्यं सर्वस्यात्मत्वेन प्रतीयमानत्वात् ब्रह्म स्वयं सिद्धम् इति तथापि सिद्धं तु प्रामाण्यं शास्त्रस्य आत्मविषये तत्रात्मत्वेनाध्यारोपितानाम् अतद्धर्माणां निवर्तनेन आत्मवस्तु विशेषरूपसमर्पणात् इति. A question that is raised in this context is, if Atman is self-evident, then what is the necessity of a pramana to know it? This is addressed in the first sutra in the Brahma Sutras. Here the interlocutor asks, is Brahman known or unknown? If Brahman is known, then there is no need for a means of knowledge or an enquiry to ascertain its nature. If, on the other hand, Brahman is absolutely unknown, then it cannot become the subject for any kind of enquiry, jidnyasa. Tat punar brahma prasiddham aprasiddham va syat. Yadi prasiddham na jidnyasitavyam atha prasiddham naiva shakyam jidnyasitum iti. Here Shankaracharya denies that Brahman is unknown. सर्वस्यात्मत्वाच्च ब्रह्मास्तित्व प्रसिद्धिः सर्वो ह्यात्मास्तित्वं प्रत्येति न नाहमस्मि इति यदि हि नात्मास्तित्व प्रसिद्धिः स्यात् सर्वो लोकः नाहमस्मि इति प्रतीयात् आत्मा च ब्रह्म. So the self is not absolutely beyond apprehension because it is apprehended, it is known as I, it is known as a self of all. Everyone feels that he exists. No one feels that I do not exist. Had there been no general recognition of the existence of self, everyone would have felt, I do not exist. न ह्यात्मा नाम कस्यचित् कदाचित् असिद्धः प्राप्यो हेय उपादेयो वा अप्रसिद्धेः तस्मिन् आत्मनि सर्वाः प्रवृत्तयो व्यर्थाः प्रसज्येरन्. Okay, so if Brahman as the Atman is known, then what use is the inquiry into it? Yadi tarhi loke Brahma Atmatvena prasiddham asti tato jnatameveti ajijnasyatvam punarapannam. Shankaracharya's answer is na tad vishesham prati vipratipattehe. There is a conflict about its distinctive nature. देहमात्रं चैतन्य विशिष्टमात्मेति प्रकृताजना लौकायतिकाश्च प्रतिपन्नाः इन्द्रियाण्येव चेतनान्यात्मेत्यपरे मन इत्यन्ये विज्ञानमात्रं क्षणिकम् इत्येके शून्यमित्यपरे अस्ति देहादि व्यतिरिक्तः संसारी कर्ता भोक्तेत्यपरे. एवं बहवो विप्रतिपन्ना युक्तिवाक्य तदाभास समाश्रयाः सन्तः. Ordinary people recognize the body alone to be the self. Others hold that the mind is the self. Some say that it is vijnanamatram kshanikam, momentary consciousness. Some say it is shunyam. Still others believe that there is a soul separate from the body which transmigrates. It is the agent of karma, the experiencer of phala. Some say that it is merely an experiencer, not an agent. Then some say there is an Ishvara who's different from this, all-knowing, all-powerful. There are many who follow different views, opposing views, depending on the Yukti Vakya and Tadabhasa. Tatra avicharya yatkinchit pratipadyamano nishreyasad pratihanyate anarthan cheyat. So if you accept any of these views without examination, there are so many different conflicting views about what the self is. And this is what warrants the inquiry into what the Atman is. Because there are so many conflicting opinions, we have to examine each and every one of them and decide what it is. If one accepts it without examination, tatra avicharya yatkinchit pratipadyamano, one is liable to be deflected from nishreyasa and anarthan cheyat. तस्मात् ब्रह्मजिज्ञासोपन्यासमुखेन वेदान्तवाक्यमीमांसा तद् अविरोधितर्कोपकरण निःश्रेयसप्रयोजना प्रस्तूयते. So Shankaracharya's response is to suggest that the knowledge which we possess is only of a general nature. The true or distinctive nature of Atman remains unknown. This lack of definitive knowledge is the cause of the different and conflicting views about the nature of the Atman. In fact, wrong attribution or superimposition occurs only where knowledge is of a general nature and lacks specificity. In the rope snake analogy, the object is perceived as existing, but its particular nature, the Vishesha, is incorrectly ascertained. The qualities of the snake are then attributed to the rope. So, in the case of Atman, I is self evident. Upon this, the limited qualities of the body, the sense organs, the mind are wrongly attributed, and the Atman is taken to be mortal and finite. In other words, the qualities of the non self are, through ignorance, erroneously identified with the self. So, from Shankaracharya's standpoint, the problem does not involve the knowledge of an entirely unknown, unrevealed, or remote Atman. It is one of incomplete or erroneous knowledge of an ever available self manifesting Atman, self evident Atman. So, the task of Shruti is not the revelation or production of an unknown entity, but a correct knowledge about a self that is misunderstood. This is all that is required. The function of the words of the Upanishads lies primarily in the negation of ignorance about Brahman. The Upanishads do not reveal an unknown being, they impart correct knowledge about Brahman that is immediately available but whose nature is misunderstood. This clarification about the immediate availability of Brahman is necessary for establishing the possibility of Upanishads giving rise to direct and immediate knowledge. Because the challenge is not one of creating anything new, but understanding what is already always available. So Shankaracharya accepts that the knowledge derived through Shruti is not a fruitful end in itself if the object about which it is informed is not in existence or not immediately available. But if the object is immediately available, misapprehended like Brahman, only then can Shruti be a pramana. Can Shruti become an adequate source of knowledge only in such a case and not in any other case? This is the point of an argument when he says, Na अनात्मलाभवत् अप्राप्तप्राप्तिलक्षण आत्मलाभः यत्र ह्यात्मनोनात्मा लब्धा लब्धव्यो नात्मा स च अप्राप्त उत्पाद्यादिक्रियाव्यवहितः कारकविशेषोपादानेन क्रियाविशेषम् उत्पाद्य लब्धव्यः स तु अप्राप्तप्राप्तिलक्षणो अनित्यः अयं तु तद्विपरीत आत्मा आत्मत्वादेव नोत्पाद्यादि क्रिया व्यवहितः नित्य लब्ध स्वरूपत्वेपि सति अविद्यामात्रं व्यवधानम्. In no unclear terms, Shankaracharya delineates the function of Shruti as strictly negative. It does not, cannot directly, positively communicate Brahman, Atman. The problem is not to know the Atman, it is to remove the wrong ideas that we entertain about it. Swami writes, Yad Vedanta Pramanasya Avidya Nirasanadvarenatmaikatva Pratipadana Eva Vyaparo न तु आत्मनि कस्यचित् अतिशयस्य संपादने इति। आत्मा हि न कस्यचित् प्रमाणस्य विषयः परमार्थतो अद्वयत्वात् नित्यापरोक्षस्वभावत्वाच्च स्वयं प्रसिद्धो नान्यत् किञ्चनापेक्षते स्वसाधनाय. So the validity of Shruti as a pramana lies exclusively in its negation of the false understandings about Atman or Brahman. Now, I want to discuss another pivotal point pertinent in this topic, namely the reliability, the trustworthiness of Shruti Pramana. The question naturally arises: what justifies our acceptance of Shruti as a reliable source of knowledge? Does its acceptance hinge solely on faith, on belief, on the Sampradaya? This query has elicited varying responses from different scholars and thinkers. In this context, I want to scrutinize a few of these responses with a view to highlighting the uniqueness of Shankaracharya's response on this matter. Shankaracharya, in his commentaries, does not undertake any independent systematic analysis of the Pramanas. Generally, epistemology is not discussed in detail in the text of Advaita Vedanta. Shruti Pramana is, of course, but not Pratyaksha, Anumana, etc. We do find a very systematic, elaborate treatment of epistemology in Dharmaraja's Vedanta Paribhasha, a late 17th century text, but otherwise it is not dealt in detail. Shruti Pramana, on the other hand, is extensively discussed by the commentators of Advaita Vedanta. And according to them, according to the commentators of Advaita Vedanta, Shruti derives its reliability through the fact that it is anadi, that it is apaurusheya, that it is nitya, etc. This is based on the Purva Mimamsa conception of the Vedas. Shankaracharya also adduces to the eternality of the Vedas, its nityatva, but not to assert its eternality, but only to convey the absence of discord and diversity in it. Very, very important to note that the Shariraka does not attempt to establish the eternality of the Vedas by a sustained investigation into its nature. It only confirms its empirical eternality, which is already claimed by the Purva Mimamsakas. There's the sutra, Ata Evacha Nityatvam. Shankaracharya writes, Tadeva Veda Nityatvam Sthitam Dradhayati Ata Evacha Nityatvam iti. We'll come back to this point shortly. For now, very briefly, let us look into the Purva Mimamsa conception of the Vedas. This is all only for relative to understand Shankaracharya's position better and his difference from the Vyakhyanakaras also. To just give context, we are looking into the other theories as well. So the Purva Mimamsa is committed to affirm the authority of the Veda as the only means through which dharma is accessible. How does Purva Mimamsa justify this claim? It justifies it through the doctrine of apaurusheyata. It declares that the Vedas are apaurusheya, authorless, and therefore without errors, and therefore trustworthy. It is through the doctrine of authorlessness of these texts that Purva Mimamsa establishes Veda as a pramana for dharma. The idea of an anadi, a beginningless Veda, perhaps even that of an authorless Veda, is not really an invention of Purva Mimamsa, because that the Vedas are Sanatana is widely endorsed in the tradition. A beginningless Veda was conceived of as existing in and alongside a world which passes through cycles of creation and destruction without beginning or end. The eternal Veda was understood to be reintroduced after each renewed creation, exactly in the same way as before. So we find this position, for example, in the first chapter of Manusmriti, where it describes how Brahma milked the triple eternal Veda out of fire, wind, and the sun. Agni Vayor Avibhyasto Trayam Brahma Sanatanam Dudoha. All Dharma Shastra writers proceed on this axiom of the eternality of the Vedas. Yet, the apaurusheyata as defended by the Mimamsakas is different. It is very technical. It is not used loosely in the way it is used in certain other texts of the tradition. Now, if you argue for a very literal understanding of apaurusheyata, authorlessness of the Vedas, if you say that these texts are literally authorless, prima facie, this appears to be a rather puzzling claim. How do we make sense of this? What does it mean to say that the Vedas are apaurusheyata, that they are authorless? A traditional Mimamsaka turns to the primacy of language to defend the apaurusheyata of the Vedas. This is how apaurusheyata of the Mimamsaka is different from the anaditva apaurusheyata of the other traditions, because it is founded on the primacy of language itself. The sutra of Jaimini Sutra, Autpattikastu Shabdasyarthena Sambandhaha. The relationship between the word, the Shabda, and what it expresses, denotes, is originary, it is inborn, it is natural. According to Jaimini, the Veda is independent, infallible in its authority, because it is apaurushaya, and it is apaurushaya because of the absolute lack of necessity of an author, because of the inherent, originary, primordial relationship between word and its intended meaning or purpose, the Autpattika Sambandha. I'll just briefly tell you how this works. According to Jaimini, the relationship between the word and what it expresses is Autpattika, inherent, not established by human convention. Autpattika is Utpattihi and Dhak Pratyaya. It can be taken to mean originating or arising simultaneously without interruption. So the relation between the word and its meaning is originary, it's simultaneous, in the sense that the presentment of the word and its meaning is simultaneous. They're inseparable from one another. The word and its meaning arise upon hearing as if physically or episodically co-present or co-evil. Such is the founding binary combination, the relation natural with a sense of permanency about it. So Jaimini's quest is not for the origin of the Vedas, but for an ontological existential immediacy, a quest for the roots and basic a priori structure that makes communication possible. And the signification is ultimately embedded in this. It's a very subtle argument, but enough to say that the Autpattika principle, which is read as originary, without discussion, the origin of Shabda, it defines the relational structure that belongs to the very nature of Shabda and Artha. So the doctrine of Autpattika characterizes the apaurushayata of Shabda, of language itself. From here, a move is made to the doctrine of Autpattika as a doctrine of apaurushayata of the Vedas. Shabaraswamin argues that because the relation between word and its meaning is Autpattika, we can deny the fixing of this relation to any agency. No person, no God fixed the relationship between the word and its meaning. It is apaurushaya. Shabda is not itself apaurushaya, but Shabdartha Sambandha is apaurushaya. Apaurushaya Shabdasyarthena Sambandha. Yet Shabde Vijñate, Artho Vijñayate. Now we've argued for apaurushayata of Shabdartha Sambandha. We have to still argue for the apaurushayata of the Vedas. In ordinary utterances, in everyday usage of language, conventions have altered the otherwise fixed meaning of words. Therefore, ordinary utterances cannot function as a pramana. In the Vedas, on the other hand, this structure that undergrides it, that it is determined according to the fixed relations, the Autpattika Sambandha. Therefore, there is no error in Vedic utterances. Therefore, it is a pramana of dharma. There are several discussions that are very important in this context, like Svatah Pramanyata, etc. But this is a very brief outline of a very complex theory. From this Purva Mimamsa position, the Advaita Vedanta commentators draw their own conclusions, their own theories of apaurushayata of the Vedas, not found in Shankaracharya. We will come to Shankaracharya at the end of this discussion, but I'll briefly look into the other Vyakhyanakara's position also. in the reliability of Shruti. Just a second. The commentators of Advaita Vedanta borrow the concept of Apaurushayata from the Purva Mimamsakas. They spin it in their own way, conforming to the Advaita worldview. So, according to the Vyakhyanakaras, the Veda is reliable because it is Apaurushaya. It is of non-human origin. What does Apaurushaya mean here in this context? Vachaspati Mishra accepts Ishvara as the Karta of the Vedas. Yet, this does not refute the Vedas' Apaurushayata. Vachaspati Mishra offers an interesting definition of Apaurushayata. According to him, the Varnas of the Vedas, that is, the letters of the Vedas, may be eternal, Nitya. The words and sentences cannot be eternal, cannot be Nitya, because no two persons can utter them identically. Therefore, when words and sentences are spoken, then the speaker of those words and sentences becomes their karta. But there are two ways in which a sentence can be spoken. It can either be independently constructed by a person to express his own ideas, or it can be repeated from the words of another person. For example, if Kalidasa wrote the Kumara Sambhava independently by composing it in the manner that he chose to express his ideas, this is Paurushayata, or human authorship of the Kumara Sambhava. In contrast, although Ishvara is said to have composed the Veda, he did not do so independently, not to express his own ideas, but rather as it was in the previous eon. Therefore, according to Vachaspati Mishra, since there is no independent author of the Veda, it is considered to be a Paurushaya, or of non-human origin. Prakash Atman first on the other hand, he defines Paurushaya Vakya. He says a Vakya is Paurushaya if, first, if after a thing is known from perception or inference, other pramanas, you obtain your knowledge from other pramanas and construct the sentences with a desire to convey that knowledge to others. Such sentences are Paurushaya. Second, if the statements which are prompted by the speaker or spoken by the speaker express the opinion of the speaker, then also the Vakyas are Paurushaya. So two ways in which Vakya is Paurushaya. Here, opinion is raga, is what Prakash Atman says. That is the capacity. It's a capacity of the speaker's words to indicate his intention. Okay. So, for example, Mahabharata will be a Paurushaya text. It expresses the ideas of Vyasa and was composed after acquiring knowledge from other pramanas like Pratyaksha, Anumana, etc. Now, Vedas are not like this. They are not like the Mahabharata. Ishvara did not first get the knowledge contained in the Veda through other pramanas, nor did he compose the Veda at some definite point like Vyasa did. At the beginning of each world cycle, Ishvara utters the Vedic sentences. At the beginning of every new world cycle, Ishvara utters these Vedic sentences, and that is the Veda. So it does not express the opinion of Ishvara, nor is the knowledge of the Veda got through other pramanas by Ishvara. Because of all of these characteristics, Veda is understood as Apaurushaya by Prakashatman. For Vidyaranya, the Veda is beginningless, immutably real, just as Brahman. The only difference between Brahman and the Vedas is that Brahman is independent, immutably real, and beginningless, whereas Veda is dependent. The only difference between Veda and Brahman here is the dependency. Brahman is independent, Vedas are dependent on Brahman. Let us look at Shankaracharya's position. For Shankaracharya, the validity of Shruti Pramana does not lie in the fact that it is Nitya or Apaurushaya. It lies in the fact that it culminates in experience. This is an extremely important point. Shruti is Pramana, Anubhava Sanatva. The aim is not to merely interpret the meaning of the Vedic texts like in Purvamimamsa, but to attain the knowledge of their content in immediate intuition. The inquiry has to culminate in immediate experience. A distinctive feature of Shankara Prakriya is this Anubhava Pramana. Not only is Anubhavanusari Tarka the aid to ascertain the nature of Brahman, but the proof of Vedas lies in Anubhava. Its a reliability lies in the fact that it culminates in Anubhava. Karma phalehi swargadav anubhavanarudhe syadashanka bhavedva naveti anubhavarudhantu jnanaphalam phalam nahi tattvamasityasya vakyasya arthah tattvam mruto bhavishyasi iti evam parinetum shakyah. Because Shankaracharya does not rely on this theory of apaurushayata of the Vedas to prove its reliability, he uses it when necessary, sidesteps it when it is not needed. When Shankaracharya argues with an Astika Purvapakshi, for example, then he uses the Veda Pramana to prove his point as citations for his arguments. But when his opponent is a Nastika, someone who does not accept the Pramana of the Vedas, then Shankaracharya will not bring in the Vedic sentences to prove his arguments. He switches to reason, to Tarka. For example, in his commentary on the Brahma Sutra, one of the Brahma Sutra where Shankaracharya says, Agama Pramanyatvat आत्मना आकाशः सम्भूतः इत्यादि श्रुतिभ्यः आकाशस्य च वस्तुत्व प्रसिद्धिः विप्रतिपन्नान् प्रति तु शब्दगुणानुमेयत्वं वक्तव्यं गन्धादीनां गुणानां पृथिव्यादि वस्त्वाश्रयत्व दर्शनात्. I might be mistaken here as in the correct exact words, but when he first presents his arguments, supplies the Shruti Vakya, but for a person who does not accept the Shruti Vakya, Vipratipannan Pratito, when the person is an Astika who does not accept Veda Pramana, he will supply Tarka, reason, or Anumana, or one of the other Pramanas in order to prove his argument. And this is how Swamiji has also structured his Mula Vidyanirasa. He first uses reason to demonstrate his points, his arguments, and then supplies the cites Shruti Vakya to prove it. Sorry. Now we go to the expression Antyam Pramanam to qualify the Upanishad. There is back and forth. My PPT is not in line with what I'm saying. I think it's a network problem. I could not see the PPT correctly. This is the PPT that we're now looking at, Shruti as Antyam Pramanam. We know that Atman or Brahman is really, truly prior to and outside the realm of this Pramana Prameya Vyavahara. It is only after the Atman stands under the sway of Avidya as an embodied knower, as a Pramatra, that the Pramanas come into play. Siddhehi Atmani Pramatari Pramitsoho Pramananveshana Bhavati. Nahi Purvam Ithamaham iti Atmanam Apramaya Paschat Prameya Parichedaya Pravartate. Without first determining myself as I am such and such a knower, I don't take up the task of determining an object of knowledge. So the moment I am a knower, I enter the field of avidya. The game of pramatra, pramana, prameya is within the field of avidya. This is why at the very beginning Shankaracharya in his Adhyasa Bhashya, he wrote Tametam avidyakhyam atmanatmanor itaretaraadhyasam puraskritya sarve pramana prameya vyavaharaha laukikaha vaidikascha pravrittaha. So the function of Shruti as a pramana is only until Brahmajnana, not after. Atmajnanat prageva pramananam pramanatvam. Paramatma jnana samasamayameva pramatritvam atmano apagacchati ityanaiva अनैवोक्त्या तथैव प्रमाणानां प्रमाणत्वं बाधितं भवति इत्युक्तं भवति. Accordingly, this triputi of the knower, known, knowing, instrument of knowledge becomes irrelevant once the ultimate truth is realized. The Atman, which is considered the knower, ceases to identify as such. The Vedas, which are deemed as an instrument of knowledge, loses its relevance. Swami writes, Kinchanyate यावदेव शास्त्रेण कल्पित प्रमातृत्वम् अपह्नुत्यास्य पारमार्थिकं ब्रह्मस्वरूपं न बोध्यते तावदेव तु प्रत्यक्षादिप्रमाणानां विधिनिषेधशास्त्राणां किं बहुना वेदान्तानामपि प्रामाण्यं नाम. तत ऊर्ध्वं तु अवशेषात् तत्रात्मनि न कश्चन प्रमाणप्रमेयादिव्यवहारः. अत एव वेदान्तशास्त्रम् अन्त्यं प्रमाणम् इति व्यपदिश्यते वेदान्ताभियुक्तैः. This is the reason why the Shruti is called Antya Pramana, the final means of knowledge, after which it ceases to exist as a means of knowledge. The phrase, this expression Antyam Pramanam, is used in at least 3 passages, but there may be many more. Just looking at these 3 here. The first occurs in the Arambhanadikaranam. Apichaantyam idam pramanam atmaikattvasya pratipadakam natah param kinchid akangshyam asti. The Upanishads are the final means of knowledge, the Antyam Pramanam, revealing that the self alone exists, after which nothing at all is required. Yatha hi loke yajete tyukte kim kena katham ityakangshyate. When we are instructed to perform a yajna, there are so many questions that require to be answered. Who should perform the yajna? With what? And how should it be done? When should it be done? Etc. etc. Naivam tattvamasi aham brahmasmi ityukte kinchid anyadakankshyam asti. But when told the truth of tattvamasi aham brahmasmi, there is no further desire for anything else. When told the truth of Tattvamasi, there is no room for anything else, no akanksha that is to be fulfilled. Sarvatmaikatva vishayatvat avagatehe sati yanyasmin avashishyamanerthe akanksha syat. Natvatmaikatva vyatirekena avashishyamanoonyorthosti ya akankshyate. So in the Gita Bhashya also, Shankaracharya writes, Shastram tu antyam pramanam atadharmadhyaropanamatra nivartakatvena pramanyam atmanaha pratipadyate natu ajnatartha jnapakatvena. In the Gita again, nahi atmaswarupadhigame sati punaha pramana prameya vyavahara sambhavati pramatritvam hi atmanaha nivartayati antyam pramanam. Nivartyata eva hi eva cha apramani bhavati swapna kala pramanam eva prabodhe. I'll just read out Swamiji's words here. Atmatvadeva atmanaha prameyatva bhava aheyatvam anupadeyatvancha pramatra pramana prameya vibhagasya atmaikattvavagame sati Rajvavagame sarpadharadi vikalpanam iva antyam atyantam abhavat na pramata na cha prameyanya avashishyante ata eva svashraya bhota pramatra bhavat svavishaya bhota prameya bhavat cha tat ubhaya nirupita swarupanam pramananam pramanatvam eva navakalpate ityarthaha. There's one last point that we can discuss in this context. The question that arises, if the pramana belongs to the kshetra of avidya, how is it a pramana at all? How can it remove ignorance if it is itself a product of ignorance? How can a product of ignorance remove ignorance? This is again taken up in the same adhikarana. The interlocutor asks, कथञ्चानृतेन मोक्षशास्त्रेण प्रतिपादितस्य आत्मैकत्वस्य सत्यत्वम् उपपद्येत इति. So Shankaracharya replied, yes, how can the Anruta Moksha Shastra, whatever the Anruta Moksha Shastra is conveying, how can we understand that as a truth if it is itself Anruta? Atrochyate Naisha Doshaha सर्वव्यवहाराणामेव प्राग् ब्रह्मात्मता विज्ञानात् सत्यत्वोपपत्तेः स्वप्नव्यवहारस्येव प्राग् बोधात् यावद्धि न सत्यात्मैकत्वप्रतिपत्तिस्तावत् प्रमाणप्रमेय फललक्षणेषु विकारेषु अनृतत्वबुद्धिर्न कस्यचित् उत्पद्यते विकारानेव तु अहं मम इत्यविद्यया आत्मात्मीयेन भावेन सर्वो जन्तुः प्रतिपद्यते स्वाभाविकीं ब्रह्मात्मतां हित्वा तस्मात् प्राग्ब्रह्मात्मता प्रबोधात् उत्पन्नः सर्वो लौकिको वैदिकश्च व्यवहारः यथा सुप्तस्य प्राकृतस्य जनस्य स्वप्ने उच्चावचान् भावान् पश्यतो निश्चितमेव प्रत्यक्षाभिमतं विज्ञानं भवति प्राग्बोधात् न च प्रत्यक्षाभासाभिप्रायस्तत्काले भवति तद्वत्. He gives many examples, not just this one. There are many places where he raises this question. Even though the Veda, though not absolutely real, can nevertheless make the absolutely real known to us, like a woman or a cobra seen in a dream, though false, has a physical and psychological effect that extends into the waking experience. So a man who dreams that he has been bitten by a cobra might die of shock. So the false dream has a very concrete, very real effect in the waking. In a similar way, the Shruti Vakya, although only empirically real, are capable of pointing to the ultimate truth. This discussion is taken up in the Naishkarmya Siddhi also. Sureshwaracharya raises the same question. If यदि शब्दोभिधानाभिधेयत्वसम्बन्धाङ्गीकारेण नात्मनि वर्तते कथं शब्दात् अहं ब्रह्मास्मि इति सम्यक् बोधोत्पत्तिः. For this, if no word can be applied to the self by the way of abhidhana abhideya, then how can samyak jnana, the right knowledge that I am Brahman, arise from shabda? To this he says, shayanah prayasho loke bodhyamanah स्वनामभिः सहसैव प्रबुध्यन्ते यथैव प्रत्यगात्मनि न हि नाम्नास्ति सम्बन्धो व्युत्थितस्य शरीरतः तथापि बुध्यते तेन यथैव तत्त्वमित्यतः. What he is saying is न हि शरीरात् शरीराभिमानात् व्युत्थाय स्थितस्य. There is no identification with the body. In sushuptasya nahi sharirad-vyutthitasya namna sambandha grahanam asti. There is no identification with the name, whatever name the person is. When he's sleeping, he has no identification with that particular name. Yet, still, tena shabdena swasambandhenaiva nimittabhutena nidram hitva budhyate yatha evam tattvam vakyadapi बुध्यते अविद्या निराकरण मुखेन इत्यभिप्रायः. The way the name of the person can be useful in waking him up from very deep sleep, similarly the Vedanta Vakya can be useful to remove the ignorance and point to the truth. Sureshwaracharya gives many examples. The way the pot, a mithya pot, is still useful in bringing water. So the Shruti Vakya, which is also mithya, can cause Brahman, the knowledge of Brahmajnana, etc. There's another example by Ramananda, where he says the sketch of a snake, the drawing of a snake drawn on paper is not a real snake, but it is only the appearance of a snake, but it can give you the correct knowledge of a snake. Similarly, the knowledge of the thing produced by Veda is valid. Is different examples that are given, but the real answer lies in the method of Adhyaropapavada. What was said all this time is only empirically. but only it is that Atman can be known by any ordinary means of knowledge, by any other ordinary pramanas. It cannot be known by any pramana is what is meant when it is said that Shruti is the only pramana. We'll look into this answer in depth tomorrow when we study the method of Adhyaropapavada. But this is the reason why Shankaracharya does not focus on the nature of Shruti Pramana. It is, if Shruti is the only Pramana for Brahmajnana, how important, it is so important, it's such an important topic to prove that the Vedas are reliable. These subjects become very important when Shruti is the only Pramana for Brahmajnana, but he does not touch the topic at all. Because Shruti Pramanyata is also an Adhyaropa. The only reason that Shankaracharya says that Brahman is knowable by Shruti is to say that Brahman is not knowable by perception, inference, etc. Not to actually say that Brahman is knowable by Shruti. Swami writes, in some places it is falsely claimed that the absolute can be known through the texts of revelation. The real purpose of such a claim is to deny that it is capable of being known through perception and other secular means of knowledge. Without the method of Adhyaropapavada, everything becomes theoretical. We'll see what the perils of not correctly applying this method of Adhyaropapavada is tomorrow. I'll just read the Upasamhara portion of Swami's text. He writes, Tadevam Sampradayika Purvacharya Vakyodaharanena iva Sangrahena Pradarshitaha Shankara Bhagavatpadamatena Katichid Vedantamaryaada Visheshaha Swayam Siddha Evadvitiyatma Nirvikalpaha Avidyaya Tasmin Pramana Prameyadi Vibhaga Vyavahara Vikalpaha Kriyakaraka Phala Vibhaga Vyavahara Vikalpascha Bhavanti Tameva Vidyam Puraskritya Vidhi Pratishedha Mokshaparanyapi Shastrani Pravrittani. This is a very powerful statement. Tameva Vidyam Puraskritya Vidhi Pratishedha Mokshaparanyapi Shastrani Pravrittani. Shrutistu Tadatmatvam Na Vishayikritya Bodhayati. Kintu Jnatra Jnanadi Bhedapanayana Mukhenaiva Tatra Pramanam Ityupacharyate. So beautifully he chooses the word. He's saying it's upachara matra. Pramanam iti upacharyate. Shastradi vibhagopi prageva atmajnanat upayatvena kalpyate. Vijñate tu tatve sopi vibhago naiva vidyate ityeva veditam. अथ ज्ञानाज्ञान विकल्पोपि अविद्या कल्पित एव नास्ति तु परमार्थत इत्यर्थे भाष्य वचनम् उदाहृत्य किरणम् इमम् उपसंहरामः. I'll conclude my talk here for today. We'll meet tomorrow to understand the method of Adhyaropapavada, which underlies the entire mode of interpretation of the Shruti Vakya and which is the core important point of the Shankara Bhashya.